Our very tall friend, Rance, was in the car with us. He and my brother were sitting in the back. I was in the front passenger seat. Are you coming to the dance on Friday night? Rance asked us both. I don't know. Dada, can we go? I asked. Is that how you asked a question? Ask nicely and maybe you can go, my mother said. Apparently, I had not said please, and my mother was obviously being a little picky. SAV, on the other hand, was a little annoyed. That's how she usually is, he said to Rance. What did you say? I said it's okay, that's all, my brother said. No, there was something else. Say it. If you don't say it, I'll tell Avon, and when he gets home, and you'll see. You know he won't be nice, so talk. The threat did not have any effect on SAV, who remained silent all the way home. He was absolutely not going to say anything. My mother was frustrated and angry. She dropped Rance home, and a few minutes later, we were home. As we pulled into garage, she said, You are very stubborn, aren't you? When we entered the family room, she pointed to the corner, commanding, Kneel over there. He resisted a little, but my mother forced him down. My mother forced him to kneel on the floor and to put his hands in the air until he was ready to apologize. She then went to the kitchen to start dinner. After a while, she went to the family room a couple of times to see if he would change his mind. She was not successful. After a while, the house phone rang. It was Avon. He asked her how things were, and she told him what was transpiring. After all, my mother may have rationalized that Avon would only punish him a little. That was all. He would not really hurt him. After all, we children had gotten our buttocks whipped before, and we lived. But perhaps deep inside her, she sensed that things were different this time and was afraid. My mother tried to convince SAV again to say that he was sorry and he could go to his room. Her gestures and facial expressions became wild and rapid, but they were all in vain. This was a day that my brother would proclaim his independence through non-participation to comply with my parents' commands and physical abuse. It was an act of liberation whose determination I would really understand only 16 years later. He was a determined soul who was able to put a fear aside much sooner than I was. Are you going to apologize? She demanded with a mixture of fear and frustration. He did not say a word. He was holding his ground. He did not think he did anything wrong, and this was obvious to me. I was watching sadly and predicting the outcome of his refusal. He's coming home soon, she said with fear, referring to Avon. As we heard the garage door open, my mother shouted out, Do you see? He's coming. Go quickly to your room. Avon opened the door and rushed inside the house. His face was full of rage. My mother said a few words to him. He told my brother to get up and to apologize. He was yelling at him, but still my brother would not budge a muscle. He did not utter a single sound. He remained on his knees. Avon became very violent. He grabbed SAV by the hands and tried to drag him to his office. SAV would not go. He seized the couch with all his might. I was getting worried, and I went toward the eating table in the kitchen to have a better look. Avon, the all-powerful, could not move a 14-year-old boy. They struggled, battled for about 2 minutes. One was fighting for control, while the other was fighting against the pain that was coming, against being told what to do. Blind obedience against docility. It was the hour of resistance, of revolt, a revolt for change. Finally, only when Avon calmed down did SAV walk into his office. However, the apparent calm displayed by Avon hid the rage he was about to manifest. He was talking to SAV without much noise, so I thought. However, what transpired next was mind-boggling. The door was closed but not locked. Avon was posing SAV questions, but we could not understand what he was saying to him. I was in the kitchen attending to the food and the dishes. I opened the freezer door to get something when SAV ran into the kitchen. Blood was dripping all over the floor. Isivi was trying to contain the bleeding with his hands. He was behind me now in the stove area. Avon was in front of me with a determined look upon his face. The blood and the pain upon my brother's face did not seem to evoke any sympathy from him. As the freezer door closed, Avon took resolute steps toward Isivi with an angry facial expression. I was stupefied. He was going to continue beating him. The whip no longer did the trick for him. He wanted to feel the infliction of his violence through his flesh. My eyes were glued upon his in bewilderment at his lack of sympathy. I seized his right wrist in determination. "Can't you see he's hurt?" I said. I was surprised at myself. Grabbing him was spontaneous, and the words I uttered came out of nowhere. Perhaps I felt a little guilty for my brother's cut forehead. After all, I was the one who started a conversation that brought this whole thing upon him. No, I didn't just feel a little guilty for Isivi. I was the cause of his pain. And no, Avon was not going to get through that night. He stood there right in front of me, perhaps thinking, he's holding my arm, or he is challenging me. Our eyes met, and there we held them, reading each other's thoughts. In the end, he began to back away, and I let go of his arm. It seemed to me that he understood that I did not want to fight him, and that I merely wanted him to leave my brother alone. He went to his room upstairs, and I escorted Isivi to the garage. My mother called the police and came out to the garage. Missa and Isivi were already in the car. She started the engine as I put my seat belt on. Just as we were about to drive off, Avon came to the garage. "Do you think it's over? Life is not a soap opera. You'll see." Was he predicting the future? My mother did not take his words seriously. I knew now that she kept hoping that things would change for the better. How about me? I heard those words, but was not brave enough to do something. Not that calling Child Protective Services did not cross my mind. I simply did not know what to do. I was not independent or brave like my brother to brace uncertainty. As I think back to that night as we drove to the hospital, I am fairly certain that if I had known what I know now about the nature of existence, I would have run away from home somehow. The only problem would have been my little brother Missa. The hospital front desk staff put us in a waiting room. We waited and waited forever. No one was coming. We must have waited at least 45 minutes before the doctor came. The desk clerk was not at all nice, nor did she seem to care about our plight. She merely said in a disagreeable voice, "Sit there and wait." "Shouldn't this be taken care of right away?" I asked. "Heads bleed easily. The doctor will be with him soon," she said as a matter of fact. I had my hand folded and was frowning. I had grown up fast that night. I was learning how uncaring people can be. We returned home that night about midnight. Avon was not there, of course, because he was in jail. The police had picked him up that same evening after my mother called them. I guess they took him because they probably saw the blood on the kitchen floor, which he did not clean. The next day, he was released. We saw him in the evening. What was interesting was that he called Isivi to his office to explain to him that what had happened was an accident, that his fist went up before he could think. That was all he said, not a single "I'm sorry." No, he only explained that it was an accident, but he could not apologize because he felt no sorrow for his act. Besides, if he had done so, that would have meant that he was wrong, and he was never and could never be wrong. A few months after the hospital incident, our mother called us into the kitchen to help her make dinner. Avon was absent from the house. As I entered the kitchen, I knew she was preparing a fancy meal. She was always cooking things that would stick to the bottom of the pan. We used to complain among ourselves because we found it difficult scrubbing the pots to get every dark spot off. You do not understand, reader. It sometimes took us hours to scrub such pots clean. Nevertheless, I must say that she was an excellent cook. Upon entering the kitchen, she assigned different roles to us. Some of us were cutting while others were peeling garlic. Suddenly, she posed a very serious question. "What do you think about me having a baby?" We were quite surprised. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I just wanted to know what you think." The way she asked the question made us think initially that she really only wanted to know what we thought. However, as the conversation continued, it was clear to me that she was already pregnant and had not informed us until then. None of us had suspected anything. I don't know, I finally answered her. Me neither, Isavi answered. A month later, we were in the kitchen again, talking about her having the baby. This time, she was going to be more direct. She started with the usual greeting. How was school today? Good, I answered. Not bad, Isavi began. Actually, my teachers were deadly boring. I almost died, I said jokingly. What classes did you have today? She asked. We had the same course once every other day for 90 minutes. The days alternated between A and B days. Listen, I have something very important to tell you, she said, pausing for a moment as we died of anticipation. So, what is it? I asked. I'm pregnant. Is it really true? Isavi asked. How long? I inquired. About a month and some days. So I was right. I had suspected the day she asked us that hypothetical question. I see, I remarked. This was one of my favorite phrases. I rarely say I don't understand. So what do you think? I don't know. It's surprising, but I guess it's good news, Misa said. I was thinking that my mother wanted a girl. She had all boys and had always talked about having one. And you, Isavi, what do you think? Isavi's reply was sharp and straight to the point. Allow me to tell you what I honestly think. It's not a good idea, he said as he mounted the stairs to get something from his room. He came back about 30 seconds later. Why do you think that it's not a good idea? Isavi was standing up, his back leaned against the kitchen wall, near the kitchen entrance. His arms were crossed. Why would you want to have a baby for a crazy man? He asked with excitement. He was serious, and his brows indicated it. My mother listened attentively. How are you going to raise a child with someone like that? He's nuts. You don't see how he treats us? That's the type of life you want for a new child? I don't think so, he said passionately. My mother was speechless, for deep inside she knew that Isavi had an excellent point. She continued preparing the food with calm. She sat in a chair and turned toward me and waited for me to speak.